capture this on the cloud. Good. So we are broadcasting live, and we'll give it a few more minutes for folks to come in. We'll get going in about, let's say, at 4:03, in just about like 4 minutes. So please stay tuned. We'll get going. Yep, we see folks joining in by the minute. So we'll get going shortly. Thank you all for sparing your afternoon joining this session. Going in about 2 minutes. Thank you all for joining in. A few more folks are joining us by the minute. So Okay, let's get going. Saturday afternoon and the weekend of Mother's Day. And I wish you, many of you mothers on this call, a very happy Mother's Day in advance. And hopefully you have a good time with your family. And that's all we have in this, during this spell of coronavirus. We are all hunkered down, enjoying time with family. So there is something good, at least coming out of this. So we are here to obviously talk about college admission process. So we'll make it fairly interactive such that you don't fall asleep. It's afternoon time. It's not siesta time. We'll talk a little bit about the intricacies of the changing landscape of college admission in the context of coronavirus, COVID-19, because it's getting a little complex. And we'll dig into that, but let me just provide you a little snapshot of where we are. As part of what we have been doing is we are running these daily podcasts and different topics. Like today is Saturday college admission, and we do a healthcare webinar every Tuesday. We do a small business stimulus package discussion on Wednesdays, do a tech Thursday. We had the CEO of RSA Security who was on the meeting on the podcast on this Thursday. And then prior to that, we had the president of Informatica who was on the podcast on Thursday. We do a Youth Friday gatherings, and in fact, just the call prior to this one was with my interns. Quite a few of them, hundreds of them have signed up. We are talking about the world of coronavirus and how we can help our neighbors. And these interns are bringing tremendous energy and ideas and innovation to what we are doing. So this is what we're doing with the internship program we have. To sign up, you look at the bottom right corner. You can go to rishikumar.com/fellowship. And if you have a student in middle school, high school, or college that is looking for something to do, we invite them to join the campaign and get engaged with coronavirus. And we have, typically we take only high school and beyond, but because everybody is sort of hunkered down at home and working out of home, there's an opportunity for middle school kids to also jump in and help out. Like if you look on the left-hand side, we are helping seniors with groceries, with medication. We also do these podcasts. We are also building masks. So if any of you have stitching skills, sewing skills, if you have a sewing machine at home, we would love to get your help with making these masks. And we provide you the fabric, we provide you the elastic. Many of our frontline warriors, they're still looking for help with PPEs. And in fact, somebody just came by yesterday and dropped off a box of N95 masks, which is like worth its weight in gold. And we got a few of those that we'll be handing off to an organization here in the Silicon Valley. And so that's what we are doing, and lots of leadership opportunities for our students, and they are all very excited. They are working pretty hard to see how they can help out our neighbors. This is the neighborhood pandemic preparedness team that we launched just about 8 weeks back, and we have a few hundred volunteers that have signed up from every part of Silicon Valley that is helping our neighbors. This is our coronavirus landing page, which has a lot of great information, specifically a newsletter, which is hyperlinked with lots of information that provide you specifics with respect to how do you apply for the stimulus package if you're running your own business, or how do you go about and access county services. So all that type of information is laid out in a concise, precise manner that you can get easy access to. And as part of this effort, we're also inviting a lot of folks from the Valley to join us. And we believe in empowering, and a lot of our campaign team members are women, and we are providing them an opportunity. Sometimes it's the interim step before they launch back into their tech career or whatever else they did. In fact, tomorrow we are running a program as part of Career Sunday. It's at 4 p.m., which is using the same exact Zoom ID that you used today. And we call it Mommy's Relaunch. So we are working with an organization that basically gets mommies who took a break because of family. And as they look to relaunch their career, we provide them perspectives, and we in fact provide training. Not we, the organization does that. So this empowerment is very near and dear, not only for the youth, but also for women of Silicon Valley. And we launched this shelter-in-place coding a few weeks back. So our students, we had about between 400 and 500 who signed up for this one. And it's held every day, pretty much Monday through Friday, weekdays. Java, Python, Java scripting. And then we also run something called Entrepreneurship Bootcamp. So we basically provide, it's a 10-week program. It's a B school type education that provides insights in terms of how you can launch your own startup and how you can essentially take a crazy idea and turn that into a business plan. So it's not late. We are in the 3rd week already, but it's not late if your child would like to join, because we have the videos and the tutorials from the previous session that you can get access to and you can get started. But we'll be running a semester 2 or a session 2 of the same exact curriculum, same exact program in a few weeks. Okay, so that's all I wanted to talk about. So with that, what we'll do is let's get started with Ben, who's here. And Ben is basically from Flex College Prep, Ben Robbins. Thank you so much, Ben, for joining in. He's the principal consultant and consultant and director of admissions. And Ben has a bachelor's degree from Yale University. So Ben, you're a very sharp guy. It takes a lot to get into Yale. So we have a lot of respect for you. And his college placements include Harvard, Yale, Princeton. So he specializes obviously in the Ivy Leagues, Stanford inclusive. I'll put them in the same bucket, MIT, Pomona College, Wellesley. And he's a college essay specialist and has helped develop Flex's own ACT and SAT curriculum. And how we define this conversation today is basically, we would like to have, there are 2 parts to it. One is, Ben is going to focus upon the landscape of the post-COVID-19 world. And I'll give you a couple examples of that. And then he will talk more in terms of, the sessions that, college admission counselors run. Essentially, how do you write an essay and how do you position your child, put the best foot forward, and how do you get yourself to convince the panelist team that reviews these types of applications to bring them into the dream college that they would like to get into. But let's talk about the world of coronavirus. And I'll give you just one example of that because Ben is the expert. He'll dig into the details. But we are running lots of town hall meetings and we have heard so much angst from parents because if you're in a public school, many of the schools are giving out only pass and fail grade, and which is causing a lot of concerns because the private schools, they barely blinked and they pretty much have that same curriculum like 8 to 4 or whatever else. Students are sitting there on that table, they're learning all through the day, they get their lunch break, they're back together. And our public schools, unfortunately, have not been able to scamper and get their act together. And I don't know why, but this is where we are. And so it's going to create some pressure with respect to the college admissions when they are comparing a student from a private school with a student from a public school that perhaps has a pass-fail grade. So that's the context of the complexity that coronavirus, in fact, not just college admission, it's going to impact pretty much every strata of society, top to bottom. It's going to be an absolute new world, and we need to define a new operating principle of working in this world. But for this conversation today, we'll have Ben focus on the college admission process. So Ben, thank you so much for sparing time today and joining us. And I also want to thank Sandhya Balakrishna, who is a resident of Saratoga. We have known her for many, many years. And she's obviously our conduit into getting the Flex team engaged with this. So thank you, Sandhya. Thank you, Ben, for taking time. So Ben, on to you, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today, Rishi. It's wonderful to talk to you, and I'm happy to provide information to help make sense of the situation.
Great.
As Rishi mentioned, I'm going to give some context today for the world of coronavirus and how it's impacted various aspects of education, specifically preparation for college. So at Flex, we help students as young as middle school sort of get their profiles in order and prepare even up to the writing of applications and essays, all the way to the final decision. So we're working with students at every stage of the process, and we're seeing how this is impacting students at all those different levels. As Rishi mentioned, if you have questions as we go, please forward those on to him. I'll be happy to integrate those as I go. There's a lot of details, a lot of different things to think about as we talk about the COVID-19 situation.
And Ben and I, we have chatted about this. Ben is absolutely okay with an interactive discussion. So please, if you put your questions in the chat window, I'll pick an appropriate time and we'll bring you on to speak about it. And that way we make it interactive, an interactive discussion. So please do share your questions in the chat window. And if you want me to not mention your name when I call out the question, or if you would not like to speak, you can also direct your question directly to Ben. Ben can pick it up also from the chat window, or I can pick it up. It's totally your choice. I know sometimes we are a little conscious from a privacy perspective. And Ben, we also have Facebook live streaming. Let's see how many people are on there, and we'll be getting some questions from there. So Ben, back to you. Sorry.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. A little context on Flex, if you haven't heard of us before. We were founded in 2001 in the Bay Area and have locations in Los Altos, Cupertino, and Fremont. I've been working with Flex since 2015, and as Rishi mentioned before, I am the Director of College Admissions at Flex. This year, class of 2020, Flex had students admitted to all of the Ivies plus most of the top 20s. So we certainly are aware of what these schools are looking for and how to help position your students to be successful in applying to these sorts of places. So in terms of what I want to talk about today, we'll cover the COVID-19 updates on testing, grades, and summer plans. And then I can talk about admissions trends a bit more generally after that. But again, please input comments at any time. I'm happy to make this as interactive as possible. So the first thing to think about with coronavirus is the testing situation. As you're aware, testing has changed completely in the last few months. AP exams, which are normally 2.5 hours, are being conducted in the next 2 weeks with 75% of the original content in 45 minutes online. This is a complete change from previous years and not something that we were sure was going to happen. When the shelter-in-place orders were first given, we weren't sure how the College Board would respond, but the AP tests are a very important part of the AP curriculum and making sure that students are getting that material and showing that mastery. So they adapted very quickly, and the only delay that we saw there was pushing the test dates back about 2 weeks. So AP exams are happening in the coming weeks. Your students are preparing for that. There's a lot of information on College Board about what sections are being covered and the format of the exam. So make sure that you're taking advantage of the information there. If you search AP COVID updates, that's about all you need to get to their page with all that information. For this SAT and ACT, a lot of these test dates have been canceled, as you're aware. So there were some centers that offered the March test date, many others were canceled. May and June have been canceled across the board. This leaves us asking, when are we going to take the SAT? What are our options for testing? And is it important that my students still take the SAT? The next offering is going to be in August with an added test in September, and then the usual tests in October, November, and December. Many colleges have been making known the fact that they will be omitting their requirement for test scores this fall, waiving that requirement, which normally is a pretty crucial part of the application for admissions officers. This is very much a temporary condition, and we shouldn't expect this to sort of be the new normal going forward. We want students to still take the exams if at all possible, because the name of the game in college admissions is data points. The more data points you have and the more data you're able to give your admissions officer, the better able they are to sort of fight for you in the admissions process. So a student with an SAT score and a student without, who look otherwise very similar, the student with the SAT score maybe have a slight advantage because we just have more information. Why is the SAT score important in the first place? We're needing to make sure that students get to the right level of university so that they will be successful when they get there. It's very important for students not to go to a school that's going to be overwhelming for them academically, and that's the role that SAT and ACT can help play in the admissions process. These things combined with GPA, of course, which is our greatest predictor of college success. So do we still need to take the SAT and the ACT? Absolutely. If at all possible, make sure your student is preparing, make sure your student is signed up for one of the administrations in the fall. The ACT did cancel their April testing date and yet have not yet made an announcement for the June. It is still pending. They have told us that they will make an announcement in the next 2 weeks as to the status of that exam. The June exam, most likely will not be able to be held in schools because they are mostly still closed with the shelter-in-place order. However, the ACT has been developing an online testing platform, which they were getting ready to roll out in the fall of 2020 anyway. So there may be some updates related to that coming from the ACT. They have told us the June exam is still on. They've added a July exam, and then we have our regular offerings in September, October, and December. So again, very important for students to be preparing for and taking the ACT and SAT. Even if it is not required, it is still accepted at schools this fall. And the more information your student can have in terms of their academic achievement, the better. Subject tests, SAT-2s are the other big question. Should we take subject tests? Normally, students would be taking subject tests sort of in line with the AP level courses that they're taking in May or June. Both of these have been canceled, and so should we still take the subject tests? Is it worth it? Again, it's a question of data points. If your student is able to take AP exams and do well in the subjects that they were planning to do subject tests in, then it may be okay to rely on those AP exam scores instead. Traditionally, AP exam scores are not given as much weight in the process because you don't have to submit them. When you were never asked for an AP score report, for instance, whereas you are asked for subject test score reports if you choose to submit them. They're verified in that sense. This year, however, the AP exams, because they are still being offered, may hold greater weight. So if your student is taking the AP exam, make sure that they are feeling prepared. There's a question here about last-minute review for AP. The College Board has a lot of materials in terms of preparation, video classes and things of that nature available. There are also lots of academic centers like Flex that has AP exam prep courses happening right now. So if your student does need some last-minute prep, certainly reach out to those resources. But again, the College Board has many, many resources available free of charge on their website. So if your student is needing to make some last-minute preparations, look through the materials that they're offering there. So SAT and ACT, still very important, still a huge factor in terms of determining a student's ability to succeed in college. And the AP exams, they're happening, they're completely different than they have been before, but colleges have said that they will honor them the same way that they honor previous AP test scores. What does that mean? Some students at some schools are able to get a certain amount of credit due to a certain score on the AP exam, as you may be aware. Usually AP scores of 4 or 5 can be used either to test out of introductory courses or to get credit for those courses in some institutions. That will continue to be the case this year for these AP exams. So rest assured, the AP exams still matter, they still count, but be prepared, make sure you know the format. There are going to be a lot of questions that are based on documents in the humanities. There are no multiple choice sections being offered. It's all sort of critical reasoning on the AP exams this year. The subject tests, take them if you can. They're being offered in August, but not in September. And then again, October, November, and December. There are very few schools and none that I can think of right now that require subject tests, but many suggest them highly, particularly in competitive majors like the STEM majors. So it's very important to have those scores if you can get them in terms of subject tests and competitiveness. Coming from the South Bay region, you're going up against some of the most competitive high schools in the country, and so it's really important to have as much information as we can for the admissions officer when you're going in the application process. So as I mentioned, the College Board has announced expansion of their tests for this fall, including a September exam. The UCs, some private colleges, including Santa Clara, have made submitting the test scores optional, as I mentioned, but we still do really recommend that as it can only benefit. I want to give you a minute to look at these pie charts and understand the role of test scores and GPA in college admissions. So on the right, you see private universities, GPA and test scores make up about half the weight of a student's application. You can think of this as a 1-2 step process. If your student is in range academically with GPA and test scores for a school, then the extracurricular activities and the college essays will be reviewed by the college to assess your student's potential. At private universities, we see this as about a 50-50 split. So GPA is always the most important, but test scores are a close, complete out that 50%. The extracurricular activities and the college essay are very important in terms of giving us the rest of the picture of a student. The numbers are not the whole picture, as you know, and private universities in particular are looking for particular kinds of students to make up their college class. So they're looking for personal qualities, they're looking for points of excellence, they're looking for intellectual vitality. And you achieve those things in your extracurricular activities, and you highlight them and explain them in the college essay. Public universities, on the other hand, put far greater weight on GPA and test scores. 70% at the minimum for most public schools of the weight of the application is based on the GPA and test scores. There is, in very progressive public schools like the UCs, the holistic review that happens, where they actually do take into consideration extracurricular activities and college essays. This is important to note that not all public universities do this, but the UC system in particular has taken this approach. This is sort of the maximum amount of weight we see given to college essay and extracurricular activities. We see this at places like Berkeley, LA, San Diego. So it's important to keep these things in mind as we're thinking about the role of test scores, the role of GPA, the role of extracurricular activities in the sort of the big picture of college admissions. These are just some numbers to keep in mind as you're thinking about what kinds of test scores does my student need to be aiming for, what kind of GPA does my student need to be aiming for. These are 75th percentile scores that we give in part because you're coming from this very competitive environment. If your student is not scoring at or above these levels, their chances at admission are diminished. So we need to make sure that these are the numbers you have in mind. As you can see for Berkeley and LA, that SAT score is 1540, 75th percentile. GPA is 4.3 and 4.31 respectively. This is, of course, the special UC GPA scale that only counts a certain number of weighted courses. So the highest GPA you can have for the UCs is a 4.33. That means the 75th percentile is pretty close to full points for Berkeley and UCLA. It's important to keep in mind. You can see the trends through the rest of the UCs there. These are the numbers you need to keep in mind in terms of, is the test score that my student has good enough yet, right? It depends. What kinds of schools are we aiming for? What kinds of schools within the UC system are attractive because of the programs they have, et cetera. So these are numbers to keep in mind for the UCs. These are some numbers for popular private schools here in California. So you've got places like Stanford and Pomona and USC and Santa Clara that we're all very familiar with. You've also got some other colleges in Southern California, Pepperdine, Loyola Marymount, University of San Diego, Azusa Pacific, and University of Redlands. You can see the same numbers here, 75th percentile offered. Note that the GPA is an unweighted GPA. So the unweighted GPA, 75th percentile at Stanford is a 4.0. Also at USC. So this is important to keep in mind as you're considering what kinds of schools your student might be competitive at. You see those SAT scores, Stanford 1570, 75th percentile. It's really pretty remarkable to see that kind of number, but it gives you an idea if you're looking to apply to these schools, these are the kind of numbers you're looking at. Again, we want to make sure that students are at or very close to these scores in GPA in order to be competitive, particularly coming from the area that you are in terms of the high school level of competitiveness. So we want to make sure that your students are taking diagnostics so that they're getting the most accurate feedback that they can, make sure that they are making the progress that they need to in their preparation. We want to teach the concepts and the strategies. That's the most important thing. And then practice to reinforce these things. We want to do all of this before you take the official SAT or ACT because we don't want to have to take it more than once if possible. We shouldn't think of there being any practice rounds on the SAT or ACT. You want to be able to go in and get your score on the first try. So Flex takes an approach that takes about 80 hours, and we really focus on that concepts and strategies going in and then sort of fine tuning after that. There's a question here about, oh, I'll actually save this for later. It's about activities in the time of Corona, and I'll get there in just a minute. So in terms of where's your student at now and what should they be thinking about, most ninth graders can hold off on standardized testing unless they are ready to go ahead and do that this summer. If you can get your SAT or ACT score out of the way during sophomore year, that's fantastic because it opens opportunities to do other things in the future. You should absolutely be doing this by 10th grade, making sure that you're getting those diagnostics taken, that preparation done. Again, we'd love to complete your standardized testing by the end of 10th grade to give you time in the summers to do other things. This is one of the big things to be thinking about for this summer because those exams will be offered in some form in the fall, and because this is one of those factors in college admissions that isn't going to change. There are a lot of other things that are sort of up in the air right now. What does GPA look like in the age of pass-fail? How are extracurriculars going to be evaluated when we're sheltering in place? These are things that we'll talk about. The test scores don't change. So if your student hasn't already done the preparation, spend some time doing that this summer. And then 11th graders, we absolutely need to take the first test if you haven't already by 11th grade to hit your target score in time. So again, as I mentioned before, these are the numbers that we're looking at. This is the breakdown in our estimation and the way that we think about college admissions for our students. How does that impact, how is that impacted by grades? This is sort of the next thing we'll get into. Again, if there are any questions on testing, please pass those along. I'm happy to work those in as we go. But as Rishi mentioned before, a lot of Bay Area high schools have moved to a pass-fail system, a credit-no credit system for the second semester. That means that your high school will not have a GPA for this semester for your student. That means last semester's GPA is the most recent one that will appear on the transcript if you're applying to college this fall. It's important to remember because those grades matter quite a bit in terms of showing sort of where you've gotten to. If you've been showing an upward trajectory in your grades, maybe you didn't do as well freshman year, but you've worked hard and are doing really well during junior year, first semester grades are the ones that they will be seeing. So it's important to keep that in mind. We want to make sure that we're positioning you well as you're going to the application season if you don't have a GPA from this semester. There has been an announcement from the UC system as well as many private schools that they will be more lenient. Normally schools require letter grades for these classes that are part of the requirements. For the UC system, that's A to G requirements. They usually require letter grades for that, for the fulfillment of those. They, acknowledging the situation, have said we will accept credit, no credit, pass, fail grades, as long as you pass, as long as you get the credit, because of the situation that we're in. This brings us to the question of some schools are doing credit, no credit, other schools have continued with letter grades. How are we going to compare them when the time comes? It's important to remember that your student is first compared to others within your high school, and that the high school counselor will be sending along a letter and a profile with specific information about the school and the context that your student is coming from. In this year, that will include an explanation of the school's response to the coronavirus situation. So the college will know what has happened at your school, and they will be able to evaluate your application in the context of your school first and foremost. If your school does have letter grades, this doesn't change the process much for you at all. You'll have a GPA from the semester, you'll move forward as usual. In terms of how do we then compare those students, we're gonna have to look at a lot of other factors to weigh the one student against another. As I mentioned before, there are more than just grades involved in the admissions process. So GPA is a portion, but it's not all at any school. So it's important to keep that in mind. Test scores can help make up some of that difference. If your student did well for a semester and was doing well this semester, but doesn't have a letter grade, a higher test score may be able to sort of keep them in the running when we're looking at them, compared to a student who did have letter grades this semester and maintained a strong GPA. So this is the sort of the thing to keep in mind. We did, as Rishi mentioned, see sort of a trend. Most private schools were able to hop online pretty quickly. We think this is largely a question of resources and just being able to sort of put in the time and make those resources available. If your student is in a public school setting, they will need to make sure that they are working this summer to cover any material that they may have not gotten to cover as in depth as they would have normally in the last part of the year. This is why AP exams are not covering a lot of information that was covered in the last, that would normally be covered in the last few units of each class, because they know that students may not have gotten the same quality of instruction because of the shelter-in-place orders. So it's important for your student, if you're heading into more AP classes that are building on the classes you're taking this year, make sure that they're doing things this summer to prepare so that they're not at a disadvantage when they do enter class this fall.
Ben, can we take a question now?
Absolutely.
So did we already address the question from Ritik Sinha? Ritik, would you mind chiming in? Just unmute yourself. It's a really good question.
Mm-hmm. The question is about activities that have been canceled and what can students do in terms of extracurriculars. During this time, will college apps decrease this year due to the poor economy, and what will scholarship situations be like at the UCs? They're great questions. I'll start with the college applications question. We've seen a slight decrease in college applications UC system-wide in the last couple of years. I actually don't anticipate that this will impact college admission or college application numbers overall. We may see different kinds of numbers. So we may see students only applying to in-state schools instead of applying to as many out-of-state schools. We may see a focus on public and private in California instead of outside, just for the concern of being close to home. Scholarship situations, really hard to predict at the UCs. Public institutions, funding is much more susceptible to economic change than private institutions. So keep an ear to the ground there, but we don't have any sort of official word on that. This is similar to the situation in 2008 with the financial crisis. So you can look at the history there and see some of what had happened at that time. That's actually when I was going to college. So my financial aid offer from my home state, the University of Nebraska, was pretty minimal. My siblings had all gone to the University of Nebraska on full scholarships. And when I went to apply, they didn't have much available because of that disruption in the economy. I'm not saying that that is exactly what will happen with UCs, but it's something that we should be prepared for.
Ben, there's another question from Rajinder. And the question is, with number of APs taken, do they still help in spite of what the scores are? How helpful are the APs?
The number of APs?
Yep.
So again, depends largely on your high school context. If your school doesn't let students start taking AP courses until junior year, then obviously the number from your school may be lower than if a school allows students to start taking them during freshman year. We do see between 8 and 12 AP courses for a lot of students. But the important thing there is, or I should say, it's just as important sort of how you do in the class. If you're taking AP courses and getting Bs, then they may not have as much value as if you're taking those courses and getting the full scores. The tests can be a good place to show that mastery, even if you got a lower score in the class or a lower grade in the class. So AP exams are an opportunity to sort of reinforce that you did learn the material. The question of activities this summer is actually the next one that I'll get into. There have been a lot of programs that have been canceled due to coronavirus this year. Programs like Cosmos, the UC Davis YSP program, Boston Rise, RSI, Simmons, Iowa, and the Kenyon Writers Workshops. These are all very well-known programs with a lot of high-level students attending them. They were all canceled this summer. There were a good number that were then moved online. So MIT, they were able to move their Beaverworks program online, SSP program, Wharton Moneyball actually was able to move online, and they're offering an additional Future of Business summer course as well that's still taking applications if you have a student who's interested in business and is a rising senior. Santa Cruz's SIP project program is online this summer, and Stanford Pre-Collegiate is putting a lot of their opportunities online as well. They are still accepting applications for some of their sessions as well. So there are still opportunities to do these sorts of programs this summer, but it's important to think about the big picture and make sure you have the other pieces in order before, I guess, worrying too much about making up for the summer plans. If you've got your test score and your GPA is in a good place, yes, let's look at some of these opportunities. Let's make sure that you're continuing to develop your students' interest. Volunteering is hard right now because of the limit that we have in mobility. But as Rishi mentioned, there are ways that you can engage online, either through political volunteering. There are organizations that need social media representation. I have students who are working with bone marrow registries and doing campaigns, all of which can be done remotely. So there are still opportunities, but I'd say look at the big picture. If you're a younger student especially, look at the possibility of doing test prep this summer. Do an online course related to a potential major that you're interested in. There are ways to continue to grow, even in a time when we're sheltering in place. In terms of how do we think about what to do when for activities, I want to give you this image to think about. So in order to use summers effectively, we want to make sure that we're building, right? We're sort of scaffolding a student's profile and building onto it as we go. So if your student is an 8th or 9th grader right now, we need to make sure they know what they're interested in. You need to do a lot of exploration, do as many online classes or exposure programs as you can to make sure your student finds the thing that makes the most sense to them, that's exciting to them. If your student's in 10th grade, we need to start picking a focus. We need to start narrowing in and making sure that the things that you're doing in your other activities are connected to your academic interest. So if you're doing something like biology, I don't just want to see things in the classroom. I want to see volunteering related to biology. I want to see maybe research related to biology. How are you taking biology outside the classroom? And if you're an 11th grade student, your activities and everything are in place. We've built everything that we can. Now it's a matter of presenting for the college application, being strategic in the major that you choose, making sure that your application fits together, that all the activities sort of make sense and form a cohesive picture. So just to go to that in a little bit more detail, 9th graders begin exploring personality and interests. 10th graders look into programs that are going to let you explore your interests at more depth. Make sure that you are, whether their online classes don't need to be for grades necessarily. If you're a student who's trying to bring up GPA or show academic achievement in the summer, then that may be a good option. There are a lot of courses out there where you don't get a formal grade, and that's okay. It's the experience that we're looking for there. Colleges just want to know that you are curious, that you are going out and finding knowledge, even outside the classroom, even when you maybe don't have to be doing that. They want to see that vitality, that intellectual vitality, Stanford calls it. And then for 11th graders, this is the most important summer. The things you do in previous summers actually sort of build up to this one. If you were able to do some sort of summer research program after 10th grade, you might get to do a more significant project during summer after 11th, be that in a structured setting or with a professor or even independently. Want to make sure GPA and test scores are in a good place. We want to make sure that major is decided as we're going into applications. We want to make sure that we're finding good opportunities, competitive programs for you to apply to. As I mentioned, there are still some open online programs that are taking applications. So if your student has all these other things taken care of, they're in 11th grade, it may be a good idea to look into some of these online programs. So what can I do? Explore interests through online courses like Coursera and edX. Do your SAT or ACT prep online. You can pursue independent study courses related to your intended major and look into ways to do virtual community service. That might be something like tutoring or social media promotion, political engagement, as Rishi has mentioned. These are all ways to still be engaging, still be working towards your college goals and showing that progress to colleges without needing to go outside necessarily. Rishi, are there other questions that we should answer?
Let's check. No, I don't see any other questions.
Okay.
So, we can make it interactive. If you would like to unmute yourself and just ask the question.
Absolutely.
So who wants to go ask your question, or you can even put it in the chat window. Okay, Ben, back to you. You want to keep going?
Yeah, I have a couple of profiles that I'd like to go through and sort of help explain the different aspects of the profiles and help families to understand how these different factors are weighted. So these are two students that Flex had in the last couple of years. You can see GPAs are both very competitive. Test scores are both very competitive. The rigor of their coursework has been high, relatively high. Sophia, the student on the left, was founder and president of the Math Club, has done national math competitions, has placed internationally in math competitions, has published a research paper and presented at a conference, and is a well-rounded student as she also plays violin at a very high level. So we can see a lot of achievement there in Sophia's profile. We can see high level achievements there that she has worked on over time. You don't get to national math competitions overnight. That's something that you prepare for. She's engaged in her school, founding and being the president of the math club, and she's doing research. So we're seeing that she does academic work outside of the classroom, which is great. And the high level violin is good to know that she does something besides study. So we like to see that on Sophia's profile. She's sort of a prototypical academic candidate. You see a lot of them in the Bay Area. So if that's intimidating to you, don't worry. Not everyone has to be like that. You see Anna on the right-hand side. So her rigor in her coursework was a little lower than that of Sophia's. Her GPA just a hair lower as well. Test score right in the same range. Her activities, however, are a little bit more varied. She was the officer for a medical club at her school, but she was also in Girl Scouts and got her gold award. She was part of the Alzheimer's Foundation service for four and more years, doing work related to Alzheimer's and raising awareness and funds. And she also helped develop a curriculum and taught a public health class at a summer camp for the city. So important to note some differences here. Anna doesn't have as much in terms of academic accolades as Sophia does, but she's done a lot to engage with her community. Remember on those pie charts, we have extracurricular activities that are a portion at private schools, a large portion next to test scores and academic achievement. So where did these students end up? Sophia ended up getting rejected from all the Ivies that she applied to, even with such good numbers and high achievements in math. Anna was actually accepted to two different Ivy League schools. Sophia ended up at UC Berkeley and Anna ended up at Dartmouth. So one of the things I'll highlight here is fit. Ivy League schools in particular are looking for students who are not in the classroom all the time. Those high achievements in academics are necessary. Anna's profile is still very competitive, even if it's not quite perfect like Sophia's appears academically. So important to keep that in mind. She also took her interests outside of the classroom. She did service through this public health class. She led her peers through the medical club officer position. She impacted her community through Girl Scouts and also contributed to larger causes through the Alzheimer's Foundation. So these are aspects that are really appreciated by Ivy League schools in particular. They're looking for movers and shakers. They want students who are going to come in and make a difference and make changes. Sophia matriculated to UC Berkeley, where she will have great opportunities for high-level research. Berkeley is known as a very academic environment, and so it's probably a good fit for her. She didn't spend as much time outside of the classroom on non-academic things, and that's okay. That's the sort of student that she was, and she still saw very good results with that profile. There's a question here about potential business major and opportunities for internships over the summer. This is a great question and sort of a difficult one. It's always difficult when we're looking into internship opportunities for high school students, mostly because there are a lot of college students who are perhaps better prepared and also willing to work for free. So it's hard often to find internships for students directly with a lot of companies. However, this is where you can sort of utilize your personal network. If there's somebody that you know who is in one of these companies and might be able to find an opportunity for your student, maybe that's shadowing, maybe that's working on a project with them that just needs a lot of manpower. This is one of the ways you can sort of approach that. I would say internships are not the end all be all for a business major. It's important to have some real world experience as well. It'd be that through a program like the Future of Business program I mentioned at Wharton, or even getting some sort of part-time job, reselling things on the internet, coming up with a business plan or business model, participating in business extracurriculars. These are all things that are important on the extracurricular side as well, because internships are not always available.
So, Ben, can I jump in?
Yeah.
So, the internship is something that is, we get approached a lot in the community. Parents are looking for internships and seeking help. So here is my suggestion. Basically, for your child, this summer is going to be very hard. And in fact, many students that actually had offer letters for internships, they are being pulled back. So the situation is actually very tight. And so the suggestion is this: so don't bank upon if your child had an internship that is currently on hold. I suggest don't bank on that, but reach out to your network. The network is probably the best way for your child to get an internship over the summer. And just pinging your friends is probably the most effective way to get your child lined up. Now, specifically for the programmers, it's the opportunities are a lot more out there. If you are aligned with the tech industry, that's where the jobs are. That's a great way to find these types of positions for your child. And so having some skills, like some coding skills, is always very good. And taking like workshops, if your child is remotely inclined to STEM, then taking these types of workshops will be very, very helpful. Like the STEM program we are running. In fact, I was just emailing back. We are actually launching an AI ML program that one of our students is going to run. And we are defining the curriculum for that, which will be rolled out after this 10-week shelter-in-place program. So lots of these types of opportunities exist. So ask them to enroll into online education and enhance their skills. Because I think when you look at the shelter-in-place, we have the opportunity. Let's say the education is sort of trimmed down. It's not keeping you that busy, and it's always the opportunity to play video games. But it's also the opportunity to bolster the learning and engage with different other areas and opportunities to enhance the skills, which is where, a student can differentiate themselves. Because, when, I think also emotionally, it can be very hard for students, specifically the ones who drive, because they are out there missing their friends. They are not going to get to go to the dinners and their coffees or whatever else, or the boba teas. So it's very hard on them, but you have to channel their energies into doing something constructive, something positive. Here is one more thing. If you look at, there is a, Glassdoor or Crunchbase, I think, or whatever that is. So you can look at the 100 companies that got funded. Look at those companies and have your child engage with these companies and reaching out to them very actively, trying to find internships, because these companies got funded already. They have the money. They're looking to expand. They're going to hire people. And why not have someone like your child as a summer intern for a couple months, right? So those are options that you have to look at fairly actively, And it's very important to differentiate your candidacy now, more so because of the huge problems that coronavirus is going to impose upon you. So it's very important to keep your child busy, and so that you can bolster your resume and compared to some of the other competition that you'll be compared against. So that was my 2 cents. Sorry, Ben.
Absolutely. No, the programs that you've mentioned are wonderful programs. This is exactly the sort of thing that students can be doing to continue their learning. So I'm really glad you mentioned that again. It's great to hear that your community has so many options and that you've been helping push those forward. Particularly the student teaching the AI ML class. It's a fantastic opportunity. Students should certainly take advantage of things like this, specifically STEM students who may not have access to the same sorts of, as you mentioned, internships and things of that nature. I'm thrilled to hear about these programs. I may send a few of my students your way.
Absolutely. And the thing is, it's not so much about, sometimes I think the options are there, right? So let's say a child is looking to make some, a summer source of income so that they can go out and invest in crypto or whatever else they do, right? That's the option we have. But then when it comes to learning, learning has completely a different impact, an exponential impact over the next 4 years. So that's the sort of guidance that, all we can do is we can talk, we can show them the way, and they can hopefully make those types of choices, But also, the summer internship that we talked about, we are doing data analytics, so we are essentially have a framework of not only college students that are joining our internship program, but also for many of the high school students as well, So look into that program, if your child is interested. We have a few hundred already, and we have a great program because this is the 6th year of the summer internship program. And every child is empowered because more than anything, when they come out of this program, they see the world very differently, So back to you, Ben.
Absolutely. Those types of opportunities and what you're mentioning, there's the data analytics side, but there are so many other aspects as well, right? Within every organization, there is a business side, there's a data side, there's a CS side, there's a social side. If your student is in the humanities or social sciences, being creative in the way that you're looking for those ways to interact. But as I said, you have a lot of great opportunities that you're making available to your community. Those are certainly things I'd encourage people to take advantage of. Learning of some sort, right? Keep learning, keep moving forward. I tell my students, you spend 30 to 40 hours a week during the school year, learning and growing in various capacities. I want you to continue doing that during the summer to some extent, right? I want you to build a summer that is full of online coding class or a community college class that you can do remotely. I want you to explore your interests more deeply than you're able to at your high school because of a limited curriculum. You've already taken AP Psychology, take the next psych course through your community college, through an independent study, push yourself forward, keep moving. The structure can be really helpful for students. So things like courses, things like you're mentioning with the programs, these can be really helpful. The more structure you give to your students, the better. They are going to be more comfortable and less anxious if they know what's coming each day, if they know how they can continue to grow. And of course, we want to mix in the fun, right? We want to be creative and make sure that they are able to relax and recharge this summer as well. It's unclear what the fall will look like on campus. Many college campuses have already announced that they'll be doing classes virtually. Some are going to attempt to do some sort of hybrid where you're on campus sometimes, but you're virtual the rest of the time. This is with all the restrictions we have with physical distancing. Campuses can't have full classrooms. And so this is affecting businesses as well. How will the world operate in sort of a half open stage? We've yet to see. I do have a lot of hope that schools over the summer will be able to develop their online learning so that it's much more robust in the fall. They were able to adapt somewhat this spring, and I have faith that our teachers are working hard to figure out, because we know that the students need to learn, we know that they need to continue to grow, and that is our responsibility to them. So I'm optimistic, but we are sort of going day by day. We need to make sure we're keeping an eye out, listening to the news, making sure we know what's going on, and tuning into these different sources. It sounds like Rishi has a great pulse on many different areas in the community to be aware of. The daily webinars, that's great. I'm really excited to hear that. So certainly stay informed, make sure you know what your options are. Come check out Flex. We have webinars on various topics throughout the week as well. I'm happy to talk to you more if you have questions. Thank you to Sandhya Krishnan, who is our contact. She and Rishi have known each other for years, and good to be a friend to Flex. So we're glad we could be here today.
So Ben, we'd love to share your contact information for the folks, but there's one more question.
Sure.
And Ben, if you have a slide with your contact information, you can share that. And the question is about, is it a good idea? It was sent privately to me, so I'm not going to bring up the name. Sure. Is it a good idea to have mentors for students in 8th grade?
Okay, so it is never a bad idea to have your student working with someone who can help guide and direct them. We do have students in middle school who we are working with. A lot of the work we do with them is making sure that they are prepared for high school, prepared for honors and AP level coursework. So we do a lot with reading ability. We do a lot with making sure math skills are in place. So if your student needs structure, if your student needs some guidance, that's certainly something that we work on with our younger students. I'd say they are in sort of the same stage as our 8th and 9th grade students in terms of exploring. It's really important to make sure that they're trying lots of different things. There are students I work with as young as 7th or 8th grade and have worked with all the way through to senior year, see them grow, see their interests develop. It's certainly worth looking into, especially if your student has something that they're interested in already and sort of knows what direction they'd like to head in.
Great. Hopefully that answered the question. If not, let me know. From social media, we are live streaming right now. So the question is from Vidya, and she's saying, how bad is it to apply as an undeclared major?
Great question. So undeclared majors historically were viewed as beneficial in as much as they showed an openness and a willingness to explore. So this was helpful in the past and viewed kind of positively. I would say more recently, it's been viewed as more unfocused and less open-minded. So unless your student has really developed areas of interest in more than one area, it's probably inadvisable to apply undeclared. It's always better to have a more defined profile so that we can make sense of all the different things that are a part of it. But as I said, if they have multiple well-developed interests, we can show that. Maybe do a major and a second major to illustrate that versus doing an undeclared major. Yeah, very few circumstances in which I can think of that benefiting a student, just because it makes you a little bit of an unknown quantity.
Yeah. So another question, is there a downside to taking middle college or one-off community college classes? Is there any downside of taking those and then it shows up in your transcript? How does that affect the admissions typically?
Sure. So in terms of community colleges, they are wonderful in California. We have a lot of really good opportunities through community colleges. So these courses are always a great option. They are college level courses, which is the equivalent of AP. They do move at a college pace. So they are one semester for a year's worth of material in a high school setting. Just be aware of that. They do move at that same pace. I would say, I can think of a few drawbacks. With something like community college, you'll have a separate transcript. You don't necessarily need to get credit for those classes from your high school. If you are trying to do that, talk to the high school to find out what courses will transfer. But if you're just exploring more academic opportunities and building the student's knowledge in a particular area, you can submit the transcript if you would like and get a good grade. You don't have to. Community college is a good way to just push yourself forward in terms of that interest.
Excellent. I was asking folks on this call to basically take a screenshot of Ben's contact information, and his email address is ben.robbins with two B's, Robbins, ben.robbins at flexcollegeprep.com. That's ben.robbins, Robbins at flexcollegeprep.com. And are there any other questions? So I did want to share a little bit. So let me see if I can do that. What's going on with the share? Okay, here we go. Okay, so here are, for our internship program, we have these roles defined. So you can see they are a broad gamut. There are a broad gamut of roles that are technical, but also there are some that will leverage soft skills. And there are some skills that will build up towards a college career, a post-college career, And these are management roles that we have for our college students. And many of our high school students actually will be lining themselves up to a management role like this one. So you look at social media, I think lots of students are really good at social media. That lines you up very well with the business career, for example. And in fact, social media is in the future, it'll be a vocational college education. In fact, it will be a major in college. I don't see a whole lot of colleges that have this, but it's definitely like every tech company in the Valley, they need social media as part of their marketing. You talk to any of your friends and there is a social media role. And typically it's the young, the 20-something folks who are running that, so because they have a keen sense of social media. You talk about communications, if somebody really enjoys writing, putting together concise, precise messages. Media manager is all about designing graphics, communicating via video, audio, podcast. All that is part of the role of a media manager. PR manager is basically somebody who liaises with the press and the outbound face of the campaign, and that provides you tremendous opportunity. Policy research, this is the most glamorous area that any campaign has. We have lots of folks who really want to dig in only in this one, but there are lots of other interesting areas as well. Marketing, we are looking for folks who have an understanding of what it takes to roll out a specific, like this particular event. How do we market that, right? You will learn tremendous amount of skills if you engage with that one, and that lines up very well with the business career. A field manager, in fact, we actually have an HR director who's got a master's in human resources. So she's actually managing our whole internship program, and she needs a team under her. So we are actively trying to recruit. Technology ID manager, we are a campaign team that uses lots of different tools. You'll be surprised if I start talking about all the different tools we use. And we need some strong technologists, who have a handle over these types of things. Operations is basically what it is, fundraiser, pandemic manager, the neighborhood pandemic preparedness team, we need help with that. And that gives you a sense of the scale of a simple campaign like ours, the type of opportunities that exist. So please get out there and discover these types of opportunities and have your child take charge in finding them out. So here is the internship program one last time. You can sign up at rishikumar.com/fellowship. And Ben, I sent you some information on that. If you're able to broadcast it to your group, that will be fabulous. But it's a great win-win because we are empowering the youth of Silicon Valley. But in fact, we have signups happening from New York, from Florida, from pretty much like a lot of different. My candidacy is as a progressive. You're running on some very strong values, and people are finding me from all parts of the country. So okay, I think we drilled through enough of this internship. Let's see if there are any final questions that you would like to have. Okay, so there is a question from Aditya. If I do a high school course in summer, will it be considered for my GPA?
Yeah, so it probably will not be formally factored into your GPA by your high school unless they do accept that for high school credit, a sort of dual enrollment situation. And that's okay. If you submit that community college transcript, colleges will consider it as part of the GPA. Every college has to sort of recalculate GPA as soon as the transcript gets away because every high school does it differently. So they're going to look at sort of big picture, see the A's, see the B's, see the course rigor, and they'll sort of make an estimation based on that. So the community college course, while it may not be formally integrated into the high school GPA, certainly still benefits you from a GPA perspective.
Super. Are there any other questions? Ben, this was very, very informative. I really appreciate you taking the time. Please do thank all of the Flex team. I've met quite a few over the last few years. We have been very lucky to have them here at the Saratoga Community Center. And we would love to do one as soon as we have the opportunity to have large-scale meetings, which hopefully is this year and not next year. And it was great to have you, Ben. Very informative. This video will be uploaded to YouTube, and you will get a chance to see it and also pass it on to your friends. And we had a good following on Facebook, and we had a good set of folks over here. Good conversation. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Tomorrow, by the way, we are doing this Mommy's relaunch for Mother's Day. And it's specifically targeted to women who took a break in their careers and looking to get back. This will provide you some sort of a track in terms of how you can get things going. So tomorrow, that's at 2 p.m. It's the same exact Zoom link, and you're welcome to join in that one. So once again, thanks for joining. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms here, and enjoy the rest of the weekend. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye. All right. So I believe we have, what do we have?